Yeah, not yet, not yet.
Remember,
Not yet. It's not. I'll tell you when it's
do
on.
that.
Okay.
It's a bit slow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Might be some problem. In fact, we need to stick this one on.
It's on now. Recording live.
Okay, so I'm standing after hesitation. I'm now standing for the Workers' Party in Putney, and I'll try and explain why that is during the course of my meeting today, and then I'll provide regular video updates for people who've been following my activity. I'll put them on the internet regularly on subject and elsewhere. If you have supported the things I've been doing in the past around the vaccines, around the anti-lockdown movement, around speaking at Speaker's Corner, around my ideas of socialism, I've been speaking here since 1985. Some of you will know me right back from that time, some of you know me from more recently. I ask you to give your support to my campaign. I need people to come and campaign in the constituency. I'll be doing a soapbox type campaign, and I also, which I don't normally do, I also need money to get leaflets to distribute to the population. So basically there's a constituency of 78,000 people in Putney, and I need to send out a leaflet to all of them. So I need to produce the leaflet. That costs about £1,700, and then it will be circulated by the post office for free to every elector in the borough. So that's really my best chance to get my message out, other than the campaigning methods that I'll use, which will be quite traditional methods. Less of the door knocking, because I don't have the numbers unless you guys come along, and more of the soapbox speaking and posters and stuff like that, you know. So that's the angle I've got, you know. So I'll make a speech now explaining roughly what I stand for, effectively. Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that subject?
You may ask a question. Yes, ladies and gentlemen.
When we left it on Friday, I must put it out there, we played a game with Chester and I won. When we left it
That
out...
was Sunday.
Sunday, but when we left it, you said you wasn't going to stand. What's happened? Had there been a trigger point to change your mind between...
I was last week when I was speaking at Speaker's Corner. I was reluctant to state whether I would stand or not, because I hadn't made up my mind. And when my mind is torn between doing something and not doing something, I shift from one thing to another. And on Sunday I was shifting back and forth, and then on Monday I decided to go ahead with it. So that's how my mind works. Yeah, I mean. A lot of people over the years have said you should stand for Parliament, or you should stand for whatever office. And the only time I did it was during the lockdowns, and that was in order to oppose the lockdowns and to use the platform that was provided by the election campaign, the London Assembly election, in order to propagate those ideas. So that's the only time I've ever stood for election for anything. And I didn't really make that much effort in the constituency I was in, but I did make an effort across London as a whole. And now I'm standing for MP in Putney, and I'm standing because I should put out. I'm standing on behalf of the Workers' Party, and so that's the banner. Bit scrappy, but c'est la vie. I'm not pretending to you that I'm a well-paid official of some organisation that's, getting back in some large, powerful forces. I'm literally, I signed up to stand this week. I've got the nominations now. I've got all 10 nominations to stand, so I'll drop them in on Monday, and then I will be the official candidate of the Workers' Party in Putney. Now, one of the issues that I raised with George Galloway before I stood was that I wanted to put in my own input on the question of what happened during COVID. So I wrote to George Galloway and said that I was initially a supporter of lockdowns in Britain, and I opposed the lockdowns by the summer of 2020, realising that it was a fraudulent campaign run by Big Pharma, Big Tech and the WHO to take vaccines and experimental therapies and medicines, as you can call them, if you want to call them a medicine, that is. Of course, it's perfectly legitimate not to do so. And they ran a campaign of fear. And that campaign of fear was a global campaign. That I don't think there's any other precedent for such a campaign in human history. And for me, I'd be standing in the election on these last 5 years of what happened to the world. So first there was the lockdowns. Then there was the PCR tests and the fear campaign. Then there was the jab campaign. All of these campaigns, and so we have a gentleman here reflecting this at the moment. One of the aspects of the campaign was to make people behave in an utterly and totally abnormal form of behaviour. They had us marked out on the streets to keep 2 meters apart. They had children kept at home, many of them in places supposed to do homeschooling, many of them in places where there might be 5 children in the family and 1 or no computers in the family, and they were supposed to do homeschooling. Mental health collapsed during the pandemic. Alcoholism skyrocketed during the pandemic. Drug abuse skyrocketed during the pandemic. Sexual abuse skyrocketed during the pandemic. Household violence domestic violence skyrocketed during the pandemic. Suicide rates skyrocketed during the pandemic. And they made out they were looking after the people. I remember my colleague, who was said to have come down with COVID in December 2020. And he was taken to hospital on Boxing Day. And he entered into the mad environment where everyone was in a hazmat suit with visors. Anyone who visited patients also had to wear a hazmat suit to visit the patients. And they had policies in place in Britain that if they said that person was likely death candidate, that they made decisions to accelerate their death by giving them doses of midazolam and morphine that represses breathing when there were people suffering from pneumonia and restricted breathing capacity. So rather than give them oxygen and protect and enhance their breathing, they repressed it with midazolam and morphine. Many thousands were sent to care homes from the hospitals, as we all know. There's no public information now. And they died because they were sent to the care homes and left to die. And then we had hysteria in society, generated by the ruling elite, promoted by the government, promoted by the so-called scientists. We were told that we're ruled by the science. That's what they told us. Ruled by the science, led by the science, informed by the science. What that meant was they were informed not only in Britain, but internationally by one little team of scientists, so-called scientists. In fact, the guy is an astrophysicist and he works at Imperial College in London. His name is Neil Ferguson. I challenged him at King's College on his data sets and his models. And he effectively ran away from the meeting, hiding to scuttle away from any questions. I challenged Chris Whitty at a meeting of the Gresham Institute, organised at the Museum of London. He ran away, they threw us out. They got police to throw us out of the meeting. Then they called more police, just in case. I challenged Matt Hancock He ran away out of the. He turned around and he said, "Does anybody here have any questions? I particularly like questions that don't agree with me." So I put up my hand.
Hancock said that.
I asked Matt Hancock all the important questions. Where did you get the idea that asymptomatic transmission was a major factor in the spread of COVID? Where did you get this idea from? Where was the evidence? And he refused to provide any evidence whatsoever. And he ran out of the meeting. And he was shocked and horrified that someone at the Royal Statistical Society could question his great knowledge about what happened. How the mighty fell, though. Matt Hancock now is somewhere else in the world. He has a Facebook page where no one is allowed to make a comment. Because whenever they're allowed to make comments, they all began to storm in and attack him. So one of the planks I'm standing on in this election in Putney for Member of Parliament is to expose the lies, the propaganda, the poisoning, the killings, the errors, the disaster, the manipulation, the psychological fraud that was carried out in the name of the pandemic. That will be one of my props during this election campaign. And I fought from 2020 summer onwards and was arrested 7 times during the COVID period for standing up for free speech, for democracy, and for genuine scientific investigation, which means questioning what you're told, questioning even the official edicts, and particularly questioning the misrepresentation of science as some kind of consensus game, as if it's like electing a member of parliament. That's how you decide what science is. That method has nothing to do with science. And I will stand steadfastly to promote widespread education in the population about all the scientific misinformation being circulated around COVID and around disease in society.
Are you a scientist?
Very good. Very good.
Are you
Am I a scientist? In terms of what the government, or better said, what the general discussion about what is a scientist goes. Well, I've got a PhD. I'm a doctor in that respect. The doctor, by the way, a PhD is a higher qualification than a medical doctor, because a medical doctor has a routine program of what they learn. The doctor is supposed to provide unique information, unique ideas, and a unique analysis of something in the world. So my analysis was a unique analysis of China. And I'm proud of my PhD. You can find it online. It's from the British Library. I think my arguments were correct. Sorry?
What are your PhD in?
I'm a PhD in Chinese political economy. So the nature of China today and how it got to where it is. Yeah? And I'm happy to discuss the details of that, as we were last week with my friend here from Beijing. Now, I wrote to George Galloway and said I want to stand on these issues, as well as on Gaza, as well as on imperialism, as well as on the campaign for democratic public ownership of the commanding heights of the economy, so that we can run a society for the benefit of all. And so George wrote back initially, this was before the election, and he said, well, I will seriously, because what I suggested to him was he should invite Andrew Bridgen and John Campbell onto his show, and in that way reassess what his own view was. And my view is that George Galloway's view of the lockdowns, of the jabs, was wrong, and I've said so to him, and he's fine with having people with different points of view, as long as the core issues, fighting against the war in Gaza or the genocide carried out in Gaza with the backing of the Labour Party and the Tory Party, 2 parties of genocide, attacking innocent people, or 1 party of genocide with, as Galloway said, 2 cheeks of the same arse.
Yes.
And he's quite right. That's exactly what we've got in British society. There is not a wafer of difference in their programme and policy between Labour and the Tories. That's why you're all so bored of the bloody election. Already you're worn out and say, get the bloody thing over. What I am appealing to you to do, as George Galloway is
as Jeremy Corbyn is, as Andrew Feinstein is.
Why is this like?
What we're trying to do is to shift the balance of power in society, to utilize this opportunity, these few weeks, and your cross on a piece of paper, to stick your fingers up against the authorities, to bring them down, to shake the balance of power in British society, to transform society from a society run by oligarchs, run by big pharma, run by big banks, run by big tech, run by aristocrats, to shake that up and bring people from the grassroots into power. Those opposed to the war, barbarity and slaughter in Ukraine. Those opposed to the war or barbarity and genocide in Gaza. Those opposed to the tyranny imposed on Britain during the lockdown period, in which our friends over here acted as agents for Bill Gates, Big Pharma, Big Tech and the psychological operations of the British military intelligence departments. I can't remember what they're called. They're called brigade, what is it? 77th Brigade. Manipulating the information in society. Banning you from saying this, banning you from saying that, blocking you here, blocking you there, and using artificial intelligence, algorithms, to control what you can see, who you can see you, who gets information from you, what information gets circulated, what doesn't get circulated, to control and manipulate the world's population in the interest of the accumulation of wealth of a handful of billionaires who control the world. 8 people, 8. This is data from some years back, by the way. 8 people own more wealth than half of the world's population. What sort of barbarity is that? That's what creates the tyranny we see in the world. That's why you have these stooges, these puppets. Keir Starmer. There's more life in a plank of wood. There's more life in a plank of wood. And little Rishi, that little bundle of joy, Rishi Sunak, running around the country, preparing to work as a public speaker and a financial investor in the United States of America. Ex-Goldman Sachs, one of the leading corporate plunderers and thieves in the world. And therefore I'm asking you, those of you here, those of you who know me online, who know I've consistently spoken out against tyranny, against abuse, against capitalism and for democratic socialism, join my campaign. Help my campaign. Help me to be elected. To stand up on these issues which you have sided with me on in the past. I ask for your support, both material, financial, and also people on the ground. I will need that if I'm to get anywhere. I need people to come to my meetings. I will hold public meetings in Putney. I will bring back the style of speaking that I'm doing here to the campaign trail. I'll stand without a megaphone and talk to the people. I'll take questions and answer and discuss and debate with anyone from any organisation, from any direction or any individual, so that we can raise the idea of how a genuine democratic society should actually function. And if I was elected, I would be willing to be recalled by my electors at any time. If they don't like what I'm doing, get a referendum together and recall me and have another election, and I'll stand again in that election. The right to recall of all members of Parliament is a precondition for having a genuine democratic society. You elect someone and then they just separate from you. They promise you X, Y, and Z, then they raise themselves away from you and do what they like. I do not stand for that idea. I believe in election and recall of all elected officials, without exception. Now, what about the Workers' Party? I joined the Workers' Party after the Galloway victory in Rochdale. I joined the Workers' Party because here was an opening to change the balance of power in society with a base. Hopefully that base will keep increasing. By the way, you know, Netanyahu and the British government. The British government said they support Russia. Support Ukraine launching missiles into Russia. What are they, mad? And then they said they want to support seizing Russian assets abroad. So in other words, we're going to get Russian money that we stole from them, that we've frozen. We're going to use the Russian money to make bombs to fire at Russia. I mean, these people are completely and absolutely insane. They've already got us fighting with military equipment from Britain. And by the way, with British military staff and advisors and mercenaries in the Ukrainian army. Anyone see the video the other day? Boris Johnson in Parliament with members of the Azov battalion, neo-Nazis in the British Parliament holding up the Azov battalion flags. That's where we're at in Britain. And we're in league with the fascistic regime of Netanyahu in Israel. So why am I standing? I'm standing to democratize society, to change the balance of society, to get the people involved, to remove the tyrants, the murderers, the killers, the warmongers, and to create a society, which is what I believe we should have with modern technology, with science, with modern culture. We have the capacity to make a world of peace, a world of freedom, a world of plenty, in harmony with the ecology. But these barbarians, the billionaires and millionaires, and the giant corporations that they own, they're steering the world towards war and destruction, hunger and poverty. We must overturn that, turn the tide against them. Vote for the Workers' Party. Come support my campaign in Putney. Stand up for your rights. Stand up for freedom. Stand up for honesty. Stand up for democracy. Stand up for the Workers' Party. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. You got any questions? I'll answer those questions.
So I've got a question about Andrew Feinstein in Camden, which is where I'm from. So the organiser, a former comrade of mine, is or was a member of the SAGE committee, and his partner also. She's now the head of SPI-B, equivalent to the World Health Organization. These are the main organisers of the Feinstein campaign. Feinstein's program is Starmer Light. It's absolutely about the global warming, spoiling, climate change nonsense. It's totally on board with
all I can say
all that
is to
stuff.
answer that. I've got nothing to do with his campaign. So what can I say about it? He's running his campaign. I don't agree with those aspects that you just mentioned. I agree with him standing because on the issue of Gaza, he's a prominent figure who's opposing the Israel lobby. And Starmer is a representative of the Israel lobby. Don't forget, just to come back to this, don't forget, Jeremy Corbyn, when he was elected, as soon as he was elected, there was a campaign to remove him from office. And that campaign was orchestrated by the Zionist Israel lobby. That's where it came from. And they ran that campaign day in, day out, until he fell from office. Once he was out of office, anti-Semitism in the Labour Party disappeared. Keir Starmer removed Jeremy, officially disappeared of course. Keir Starmer removed Jeremy Corbyn and then ran a campaign to purge the left from the Labour Party. Diane Abbott has been a campaigner for the rights of the people. Unfortunately, I have no idea why she wants to stand for the Labour Party, who have kicked her while she was down again and again and again. She did nothing wrong. She did nothing wrong. She did nothing wrong. What she's doing wrong is trying to stand for the Labour Party. I used to believe, from when I was 17 years of age until 2019, I used to believe it might be possible one day to change the Labour Party into a genuine socialist democratic party. We had our moments. We had a brief moment under Jeremy Corbyn, but unfortunately he did not have what the Spanish call the cojones. He didn't have the balls to stand up to those who challenged him, to those who undermined him, to those who lied about him. And when there was a coup d'etat, a chicken coup as they call it, in 2016 against Jeremy Corbyn, and he won a resounding majority against, what was that guy, Owen, what was his name? Anyway, this guy, they stood Owen Smith, was it? Owen Smith. When he stood against Owen Smith, wiped the floor with it. This was the moment Jeremy Corbyn had to change British politics. And he blew it. He blew it because he didn't appeal to the Labour members to remove every single one of those MPs who were opposing, who were seeking to undermine and overthrow him. To undermine not just Labour Party democracy, but democracy in Britain as a whole. That's what it represented. Because if a party is supposed to represent its members, and that party actually represents big business, then you cannot say there's genuine democracy in this society. So that's my view, that question.
To what extent do you think George Galloway will change the Britain politics identity?
So what?
To what extent do you think George Galloway will change the politics identity of British people?
When Galloway was elected, Rishi Sunak came on television, you may remember. And he made a very strong performance compared with his performance when he declared the election. That damn squib of a performance. He made quite a strong performance. And he said, our country is being taken over by hate marches, by weekly protests that are anti-British. That was basically what he was saying. And the consequence of that propaganda, reinforced by Suella Braverman, and reinforced is that you have the events that we saw yesterday with Tommy Robinson in central London, where you have the idea being promoted that London and Britain has been taken over by Muslim thugs. That's the idea they're promoting, that Muslim thugs have taken over Britain and that the white man must now stand up to protect his national identity. If the national identity of Britain, I ask this for Tommy Robinson and his supporters, if the national identity of Britain is what you're protecting, then why are you lacking up to every word that Netanyahu and the Zionists in Israel say? Why are you lacking for them if you're standing up for the people of Britain? You're actually standing up for the Zionist lobby, trying to whip up hatred between the communities, between the Jewish and the Muslim, the white people and the Asians. That's what they're trying to do. And Tommy Robinson acts as an agent to those interests. That's what I say is going on with Tommy Robinson and with the Rishi Sunak's campaign against George Galloway. So Galloway is showing that Britain is composed of many races, of many religions. He is a Catholic, I'm an atheist. He's conservative, I'm very liberal. Others are Muslim, others are Sikhs, others are atheists, others agnostic, others Lutheran. The Workers' Party will not raise your identity, religion, sex above anything else. We will raise class to the central issue in this election. What is in the interest of the working class? That's what the Workers' Party stands for. I'm going to take a break, I'm tired, so Piers can get up.
Well, thank you very much. Oh,
Stop on Sunday.
the